Hello, everybody. It's Bill McKibben. I'm the founder of Third Act, and our slogan is no time to waste. And that couldn't be truer than right now. We're barely 90 days out from this election. We're not going to waste any time getting started tonight. I'm going to turn it over. People say this person needs no introduction. This person needs no introduction. So I'm not going to give her one beyond saying we love her enormously. Jane Fonda.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Hi, everybody. It's Jane Fonda. I'm so excited to be here with all of you to support Kamala Harris for president. You know, I've been around a long time, and I don't recall any election. Over my 80 plus years, I don't recall anything like this, where so all of a sudden it became exciting and hopeful and a total turnaround. And I know we all feel the excitement, but don't you also feel the the vast potential for the future that has opened up? I mean, it's not just because the orange man is terrible. It's because Kamala is the leader we need right now. You know, she's fierce, she's smart, she's experienced, and she can beat him. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling it in my body and my bones. We can do this. We can. And now we have to persuade and inspire our family, our colleagues, our friends and neighbors to work and to vote for Kamala Harris. We have to do phone calling and door knocking and house parties and letter writing because our democracy is on the line. Our future is on the line, but Kamala understands the climate crisis. See, I'm a climate activist, so that's what I look for. Does she get it? She knows what's at stake. And let me remind everybody that one of the key things we want her to do when she's elected, do away with the $20 billion subsidy that we give to the oil and gas companies every year. $20 billion of our taxpayers' money going to the very people that are killing the planet and killing us while they make trillions of dollars in profits. This issue, the subsidies issue, is totally grotesque. I mean, think of all the important things, the forward-looking things that $20 billion could be used for. And one more thing, after we help elect her and after the celebrating, we need to stay united and active to make sure she has all the pressure and support she needs to deliver on her promises. Okay? Thank you for being on this call.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kafi Ahmed. I thank you so much, Jane. I personally get very excited seeing Jane Fonda's face on camera, so I'm sure you share my excitement. My name is Kafi Ahmed. I have the distinct pleasure of serving as Third Act's CEO. And Third Act is a movement of Americans utilizing the power and passion of Americans over 60s, fighting for our planet and our democracy. Our commitment here at Third Act is to our humanity, to our communities, and to building a truly joyful movement that will carry us through this election and beyond. Because on November 6th and 7th and all the days that come after, we will still be here fighting for our democracy and for the future of our planet. Great PAC is the newly launched political action committee powered by Third Act and our base of older Americans. I want to take just a quick second to thank our truly remarkable Third Act staff who made this call possible tonight on very short notice. And to our working groups, there are thousands of Americans over 60 in working groups across the country for Third Act doing some of the most brilliant and remarkable organizing you can imagine, and with the passion and the joy and the thoughtfulness and the care that is required to make these movements last for the foreseeable future and to do the thing we want to do, which is to protect our planet and our democracy. We have a lot of opportunities that you can get involved in and get activated. You're going to hear from some of the most brilliant minds in this country in a second. And I just want to give you some information on some activities you can participate in. We have opportunities for you to do phone banking and postcarding in the coming weeks. In just a second, you'll see it on your screen. Some postcard writing and phone banking opportunities. You can go ahead and utilize the QR code on your screen for each of these. Also, we'll be dropping links in the chat, so you can click on those as well if you prefer. Next, we have the opportunity to phone bank directly with our friends in Florida. And you can participate in that. Again, feel free to utilize the QR code. We got to support and help bring out low propensity voters in the state of Florida, as we know, a crucial state in the fight for our democracy. You can also participate in virtual postcard writing to help mobilize voters for this particular election. And then, of course, you are welcome to join us here at Third Act for our Welcome to Third Act calls that we have on a regular basis. And newly coming to you, we'll be having bi-weekly calls, inviting folks to participate and give you up-to-date, up-to-the-minute information about what is happening, how you can participate, what you can do. These will be happening starting on August 14th and taking us all the way through the last Wednesday of October, the Wednesday before Election Day. That's a great way to find out the most up-to-date information about what's coming and how you can participate. I'm going to go ahead and give it over to, it's my pleasure to introduce Third Act Senior Advisor and someone whose heart leads us on the path to justice always, my friend Akaya Winwood.
Here. Thank you, Katya. I am so glad to see so many folks. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm so glad to see so many folks, and thank you for joining us tonight. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing a longtime senator from Vermont. He's been a fierce advocate for so many of the things we care about. He's been one of those people who's a good troublemaker. And probably most important, he's one of my newest cousins. I want to introduce Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie?
Kaya, thank you so much. Let me thank you and my fellow Vermonter, Bill McKibben, and all of the staff for Third Act for the extraordinary work that you're doing and for the brilliant idea that you had. You know, there are millions of seniors all over this country who believe in democracy, who want to be productive, and you have given them the opportunity to play an important role in shaping the future of our country. You know, Kaya, I was thinking just this evening about what I would say, and I was thinking back to when I was a kid in public elementary school in Brooklyn, New York. And I was thinking about those times and remembering a kid in my class, a little girl, whose father died in World War II, and thinking about that whole generation, great generation of people who fought and defended democracy during World War II, who before that had to deal with the Great Depression and all of the struggles that my father and many of our parents went through at that point, and the incredibly courageous workers who stood up and formed trade unionism, created industrial trade unionism during that period, which improved the standard of living for millions and millions of Americans. And, you know, that was our parents and the enormous struggle they played in preserving democracy and protecting our interests as kids at that time. And then I think back about our generation and what we did as young people and the role that we played in the civil rights movement, fighting segregation and racism, in the women's movement, in the gay movement, in the environmental movement. Many of us as young people were active in helping to end that disastrous war in Vietnam, which took 59,000 lives from our generation. So, you know, that's the history that we have experienced in our lives. And I think now, you know, as a father of 4 and a grandfather of 7, that I want to make sure that this country goes forward and not backwards. And I just believe that our generation, we don't have the luxury of just turning our backs on what's happening. We've got to continue the struggle. And I don't have to tell anybody that the struggles we face today are extremely challenging. Bill McKibben, one of the co-founders of Third Act, has been a leader in this country and world in telling us that if we don't get our act together as a planet, what our country will look like in future, in the future for our kids and our grandchildren in terms of climate change is not good. It will be increasingly unhealthy, uninhabitable. We are looking at attacks against democracy. We fought as young people to expand democracy, to make sure that 18-year-olds could vote, to make sure that we're going to end the kind of racism that existed all over this country, denying people of color the right to vote. And now we're seeing attacks on the very foundations of American democracy. Today, we're looking at more income and wealth inequality that we have ever experienced in the history of this country. People on top doing phenomenally well, working people struggling. And we can't turn our back on the need to create an economy that works for all of us and not just the few. So those are just a few of the challenges that we face. We inherited, we are grateful to the people who came before us. And we are proud of what we did as a younger generation. And now as older people, we have got to make sure that the planet we leave our kids, the democracy we leave our kids, the economy we leave our kids is a strong one and a healthy one. So I am, very excited to be supporting as strongly as I can Kamala Harris for president. I just came back a few days ago. I was in Minneapolis with Ilhan Omar, one of the great members of the Congress, making sure that she is doing what we can to make sure that she's reelected. We went to, another town, in Minnesota, good crowds, just rallying people to get out and vote. And I think that if we get on the phone, we talk to our family members, we talk to our neighbors, we can not only win this election, but we can win it big. I think the American people are getting sick and tired of Donald Trump and his pathological lying. They're getting tired of a candidate in Trump who doesn't even believe in the reality of climate change. Somebody who still denies that he lost the election and is not prepared, I think, to accept defeat when it happens again. And somebody who, just is not of the character that we need as a leader of this country. So I think we have a chance to win this election. We have a chance to win it big, but that is not going to happen unless all of us get involved in this election and make sure that Kamala is our next president. So I want to thank Third Act, because what you're doing is exactly right. You're tapping into a resource of older people who want to play a role, have not been asked, I think, sufficiently in the past. So let's go out and do it. Third Act, thank you very much. Take care.
Bernie, thank you very much. Greetings to everybody from the Green Mountains of Vermont and Akaya from the hills of Oakland overlooking Lake Merritt. And the two of us are going to be your sort of MCs for tonight, just kind of keeping things flowing here. It's, of course, mild chaos, but of the best sort, because so many people are joining in and things are coming together so quickly. This is by far the biggest call that Third Act has ever put together, and people are just streaming in more and more and more. By the minute, we keep having to buy more capacity from Zoom to let more people in. That's the right kind of trouble to have. Akaya, you know what? I want to ask you a question here at the beginning. Kaya is one of my dear friends in the whole world. So I know, among other things, that she integrated her public school system in California when she was a girl. Did you, what is it? Would you have imagined that when you were a little girl, that another little girl would be growing up, a Black girl in this country, to be the next president of the United States?
Actually, it wasn't my dreaming. It was my mother's dreaming, right? She was born in the 1920s, and I was born in the 1950s, and when I was born, there were very few options for Black women at that time. And she was committed to changing a bit of the world. And so became president of the local NAACP and all the things. And at one point, it was time to integrate the schools, and they had to be strategic about who to send. And so 8 of us got on the bus, 8 young Black kids, and they dropped us off 2 by 2 per school. And I'm remembering that no one spoke to us. It was just an awful, in many ways, awful situation. However, my mother knew at that time that it was important that we do our piece to change the systems that were. And so, I put on my Black patent leather shoes and straightened my socks and went off to school. And I don't think my mother could have, and her name was Dorothy Jean. I just want to honor her here. I don't think that she would have been able to have dreamed of a time when a Black woman could be in front of the stage in the way that Kamala is, but she tried to dream it, and it was in putting me on that bus that now is making her dream possible. That we will have a president who looks like me and her, and all that is such an important thing. So I have great faith. And I actually have a question for you, Bill, in return. You've got a 6-month-old, almost 6-month-old grandson, Asa. And I like to call him my grand nephew-ish, because everybody's my cousin. And I've been imagining 8 years, his first 8 years of his life being framed by having Kamala as president. What do you imagine might be possible for him if that's the case?
Well, that is such a beautiful thought. And, it is my first grandchild, and it is amazing to now be fully in love with someone who's going to be alive in the 22nd century. A lot of things that I've spent my life working on are suddenly even more concrete than they were before. I've been showing him the last few days he's been visiting, so I've been showing him the trees of the Adirondacks and Vermont and teaching him pine and hemlock and spiky spruce and all the things he needs to know. And man, do I want those things to be there for him. So that's why, among other things, this fight feels so, so, so real right now. And it's why I'm so happy to get to introduce one of the people who's taught me about those mountains and those woods. You all know Robin Wall Kimmerer because she's, among other things, the author of the absolute runaway bestseller of all time, Braiding Sweetgrass. But I've known her for a long time before that, as also one of just the great botanists and understanders of these beautiful woods of the humid East. And I've also had the opportunity to read the galleys of her forthcoming book out this autumn, The Serviceberry, which is just magnificent. It's Braiding Sweetgrass meets Small is Beautiful, and a truly classic volume. So what an honor to get to turn things over to Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Thank you, Bill, and greetings from the other side of the Adirondacks. I've been spending this beautiful summer week with my 3 grandchildren, paddling on a wild Adirondack River and thinking about my responsibilities to their future. And when I find myself growing into elderhood, a question I think a lot about is, what does it mean to become a good ancestor? And it seems to me that part of that is to lift up new leaders, to support them in defending our values and defending what we love, contributing our gifts to the flourishing of the next generations. And as I watched my kids fall in love with the wild river, it brought tears to my eyes because there's nothing I want more than a world which is whole and healthy and green for my grandchildren, for your grandchildren, the grandchildren of pine trees. And with the ascendance of Kamala Harris, I'm so excited to be for something, to be inspired by the affirmative energy, not just recoiling in disgust from the specter of a Trump presidency, but energized to help create a positive future for all of our grandchildren. And in this time of hyperpolarization, I think we're all looking for common ground that could bring people together for a common purpose. And Kamala Harris represents that. To me, if we're looking for common ground, we need look no further than the ground itself, the land. And regardless of party, we all need clean air and pure water and healthy soils and the nourishment that comes from wild places. Because after all, a river doesn't ask for your party affiliation before offering you a drink. And the truth is that without a livable climate, everything else falls away. And the Biden-Harris administration stands behind the strongest US climate policies to date. And we need to unite behind Kamala Harris's ongoing climate leadership in the transition to a new green economy. And we have seen this wonderful recent outpouring of support for her candidacy, reflecting the excitement that we all feel tonight. I've loved to tune in to teachers for Kamala, farm workers for Kamala, Black women for Kamala, white women for Kamala, white dudes for Kamala, cat ladies for Kamala, and tonight we join as elders for Kamala. And I think we could imagine a similar enthusiasm from our more than human relatives too, as she works on their behalf. If anybody bothered to poll them, I suspect we'd see pollinators for Kamala, rivers for Kamala, forests for Kamala, climate for Kamala, and I will stand with them. And as I travel around the country, I am inspired by folks sitting at the edge of their seats, just waiting. They are waiting to be asked to make a difference. And the actions that are proposed here by Third Act tonight are wonderful invitations to do exactly that. And Kamala Harris's candidacy ignites that in people. It's exciting to imagine how she is rallying the forces to defeat the monstrosity of the MAGA extremists and ushering in a new political climate that reaches for a just and verdant future. She will restore and protect reproductive rights, restore voting rights, and surround herself with other visionary leaders. I'm thinking about the hope for continuity for Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland and her revolutionary work for Indigenous land rights. And in my culture, we speak of a warrior. A warrior is someone who puts the good of the people ahead of themselves, who inspires others to do the same. And it is time for a fierce woman leader, compassionate and smart, who believes in the rule of law, who uses science, who uses evidence and reason, who can speak a sentence that is not only coherent and complete, but sends shivers down your spine, who puts principle ahead of power, country ahead of corporations, and who will be fiercely protective of justice for all. In reciprocity for the gifts of freedom and democracy, of wild rivers, of living in this beautiful homeland, I want to offer my gifts in return in financial support, in advocacy, in energy, in postcarding, and phone banking on behalf of this warrior woman, Kamala Harris, and on behalf of our country. I hope you will too. Thank you for listening.
Robin, thank you so, so, so much. That was incredibly beautiful. And man, oh man, if that doesn't get you to pull out your credit card and send some money, which we need, the link is in the Dropbox. The reason we need it is because there is no group that Donald Trump is targeting more than older voters. That's who he's counting on. He thinks that we're his last refuge, and we have to prove that we're not, that we are ready for the future, eager for the future, eager to go forward. Speaking of going forward, Akaya, I think you've got Judith LeBlanc on ready to go in a second, yeah?
Yeah, I do, but I'm sitting here with pollinators for Kamala first, and I'm sitting here, I need that t-shirt. I really do. Um, I'm delighted to introduce Judith LeBlanc. She is from the Caddo tribe in Oklahoma. She is executive director of Native Organizers Alliance. She's also on the board of two of my favorite organizations, NDN Collective and Illuminative. And I'm sure, Judith, that you and I have a lot in common. I am delighted at what you're bringing into the world. And so my question for you here is, sister, what's your wisdom right now in this time of great change?
Well, I'm just overjoyed to have been invited into this circle. Yes, I'm a citizen of the Caddo Nation and a U.S. citizen. And so Native peoples, we're dual citizens, and we have responsibilities to both nations, sacred responsibilities. And as a Native woman in the 21st century, there's one lesson that we've learned, and that is representation is not a destination, but it is a critical element to forming what we've never had, a real, functional, inclusive, multiracial democracy, which is under threat. Even the vision of that is under threat. President Biden and Vice President Harris nominated the first Native woman to be in the executive branch of this government, the first ever. The first two Native women were elected to Congress in 2018. So representation is not a destination. What it is, it creates new conditions under which we will organize for the solutions, because elections don't solve problems. They create conditions in which we organize to solve the problems that our people, our country, and the globe face. Right now, there is a mass movement of people who have diametrically opposed values to what we share. Diametrically opposed values. And it's not one election cycle that's going to move them from those values. It's going to be many election cycles. But if Kamala is elected, if we organize at the grassroots to turn out a historic vote in every community, it'll be the beginnings of a movement for saving Mother Earth and addressing climate change. It'll be the beginnings of and the reigniting of movements for sovereignty and against systemic racism. It'll be the beginnings of getting people to question some of the values that are being perpetrated by the MAGA people, by this situation in our country where we're being pitted against one another. And as a Native woman, if Native people and tribal sovereignty are not at the center of the democracy that we all envision, then we will have failed our ancestors and we will have failed our descendants. So when people vote for Kamala, we're voting on behalf of our ancestors and for our descendants. That is what's at stake. We have the only moment in time in this election to take an action that brings the past and the future together. Elections don't solve our problems, but they create new conditions under which we can organize the grassroots to play their role in bringing about solutions. And so I greatly appreciate the work of Third Act. And I am just, yes, free to be hopeful, not driven by fear or anxiety, but to organize at the grassroots in Indian country to play our role, because the stakes are high, the margins are narrow, and the Indian vote in 7 states is decisive. So I'm committed, and I hope all of you will be as committed to doing what we must for the ground game, because the ground game is what's going to determine everything, the grassroots ground game. And I'll tell you, in Indian country, we got game. And if any of you are going to be at the Democratic Party convention, come look for the panels, Native Organizers Alliance Action Fund, along with a number of other Indian groups will be talking about how we plan to mobilize the vast majority of people who deserve Kamala being in the White House. Thank you.
Judith, thank you so much. There's no better organizer in this country, and what a pleasure to be with you. And you said a couple of things that really reminded me. Watching Deb Haaland in this administration has been one of the great pleasures. And I remember joining a fundraising call for her, sort of like this, when she was first running for Congress years ago in New Mexico, showing up to support her. And it's what a pleasure it's been to watch her ever since. You said something else that's really important, which is that politics doesn't end on election day. Politics starts on election day. And that's why at Third Act, we're going 365 days a year. There are working groups in every country and every state in the country almost now. If you go to thirdact.org, you can join up and become a part of this movement. We do a lot of this kind of work, but we also do some very straightforward front lines kind of work. I'm going to introduce somebody who I had the great pleasure, in a weird way, of spending 3 days with in adjoining cells at Central Cell Block in the District of Columbia after the protests that marked the beginning of the fight against the Keystone Pipeline, the ultimately successful fight. Gus Speth is a remarkable American, one of the founders of the Natural Resources Defense Council in the wake of First Earth Day. He was Jimmy Carter's chair for his Council on Environmental Quality. He won the UN, he ran the UN Development Program. And yet when he was in that jail cell in DC, he sent out a note to the press that said, "I've held a lot of important positions in this town, but none of them seem more important than the one I'm in right now." That really stuck with me. So Gus, tell us how you've seen an election or two, how you're thinking as we head toward November.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Yeah, you've gotten me into a lot of trouble over the years, and I appreciate it, honestly. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call. I started working on the climate issue way back in 1979. It was only 45 years ago, right? I was chair of President Carter's Council on Environmental Quality at the time. And I just want to say that I'm supporting Kamala with all my heart and all my energy. And the main reason is climate. Consider these 3 things. First, the contrast with Trump couldn't be more stark. Trump undid over 100 climate and other environmental protections in his term. A second Trump term would be worse, even than that. As he says, this drill, baby, drill. We can't let that happen. Second, Kamala has been a full partner in the 3 great things that the Biden administration has done on climate. She's been all for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really a renewable energy act. And indeed, without her vote as president of the Senate, it wouldn't have passed. She's been fully behind an impressive raft of new regulations that the Biden administration has gotten out recently. And thirdly, she has been a party, and a full party and a promoting party of the remarkable goals that the Biden administration has set for climate, including basically a phase out of fossil fuels by mid-century. No prior president has taken such a position. So that's the second set of reasons. The third is that I actually think there are great reasons to believe that Kamala will be tougher on climate than Biden. One test here is her early support for the Green New Deal, her other actions as a senator, what she did as Attorney General, and she really gets the international dimension of the problem. 90% of the emissions of greenhouse gases now come from outside the U.S. We need a major international program in this area, as well as new and major domestic measures as well. So here I am. I'm 82 now. I'm in surprisingly good health, surprises me. But you know, it still might be my last time to vote for president. And I'm excited, genuinely excited. I think this may be the most consequential election I've had an opportunity to vote in since 1964. Climate is at stake, democracy is at stake, social justice is at stake. So let's go win this thing. Let's put a woman in charge. Thank you.
Gus, thank you. The most consequential election since 1964, that is saying something. And it does feel like the election of our lifetime, which is very good news because we're raising lots and lots of money tonight. I think we're going to put back the slide up that shows you how you can donate. Donate because we have the Harris campaign has a lot of needs to get out the vote, and we have a lot of needs to do the work that will allow us to reach elder voters in particular. Look, there are 70 million people over the age of 60 in this country, and we punch above our weight because we all vote. There is no known way to stop old people from voting. So it means that if we can turn 1 or 2% of those older voters in a different direction than we were headed, then we have an extraordinary opportunity to swing this entire election. I don't know if anybody saw the pictures or not of the golf carts down in the villages in Florida, always a Trump bastion, but this time there were 200 or 300 of them out there with Kamala banners driving back and forth. We can do this. We can do this. So use that QR code or go to the link that is in the chat and donate enough money to really help. Our planet is outside its comfort zone. Our democracy is outside its comfort zone. So we need to be just a tiny bit outside our comfort zone too. Akaya, you have the great honor of introducing one of our old and dear friends and a neighbor of yours there in the Bay Area of California. So I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right, thank you. You know, this is happening so quickly. Perhaps we can all take a collective deep breath. 2 weeks ago, this call would have been completely impossible if I'd said, well, guess what we're going to be talking about? People said, what? And yet here we are. And I can feel our ancestors' excitement. And I can also feel the ones who are coming after us saying, yeah, do this work, make this possible for us. So let's remember the context in which we're doing this. So Rebecca Solnit is a writer, she's a thinker, she's she's fierce, she's an advocate, she is really funny. I enjoy her completely. And I was touched by Judith's comment about we're now free to be hopeful. And as one of the people who has written about hope, the importance of remembering that hope is an essential part of our human existence, and how important it is as we think about what we're becoming as we transform as humans. It is my delight to introduce a dear friend of mine, Rebecca Solnit.
Hello, everybody. It looks like there's almost 11,000 of you online, which is really exciting. What a moment. I'm sure you're all feeling some of what we who are talking to you are just there. I don't think there's ever been a moment like this. It's been a hell of a summer, and the first part of it wasn't so fun and easy. But what I found so profound about those 3.5 weeks when Joe Biden was being pushed out of the race is I felt in a way maybe I've never felt before that people care passionately about this country. There's a lot of things that tell us the only thing that matters is our bank account and our personal lives. A lot of things that encourage us to privatize our imaginations, our wallets, and everything else. But that public spiritedness, that passion for justice, democracy, a hopeful future, for inclusion, for human rights, for environmental protection, that was driving people, the ferocity of their passion was really exciting, and it really moved me deeply. But I was a bit worried. Here's something that separates me from everybody else you're going to hear on this call. I've had the great pleasure and honor of voting for Kamala Harris in every election she's ever run in. I voted for her 6 times. In a few months, we're all going to get to vote for her a 7th time. I was worried when she became the candidate that she was going to face the kind of misogyny, the kind of racism, the kind of sneers from the press that I'd seen in a lot of her previous rounds. The ecstatic embrace of her, I think, was partly because the tension was breaking after that 3.5 week stalemate. But I think a lot of it was something hopeful and beautiful and profound that I didn't anticipate. This is a different country. The different reception she's getting is because we're a better country. Seeing those white dudes all get behind Kamala Harris, figure out how to be white guys who are really right there in the progressive battle, has been so exciting. Seeing all these coalitions, cat ladies, cowboys, Republicans for Harris, rural voters for Harris, etc. I don't think we've seen anything like it. So the people are there, and the candidate is amazing. She has a long history as a climate advocate. And of course, as everyone has said, this election couldn't be more stark. We're really voting on whether or not we have a future. 6 years ago, scientists told sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. 6 years ago, scientists told us we had 12 years to get it right on climate. Some really good stuff has happened in the last 6 years, but some of those were Trump years. Not nearly enough has happened. We got 6 more years. If we elect Kamala Harris, she'll be president till 2029. Those are the decisive years, not just for those of us on the Zoom, not even just for our grandchildren, for everyone around the world, for every living thing, for the rainforests, for the whales, for the Arctic, for all living things for the next 10,000 years. Harris is an incredible climate champion. She was one as Attorney General of California. She was one as a senator. She led a lot more than people realized when she became vice president. My friend Leah Stokes has an incredible piece in The Guardian you should all read about all the things she's already done, her deep commitment to climate. And as other speakers have said, without a livable climate, we don't got nothing. So this is an incredible moment. I believe we can win. I believe that all of us need to do everything we can to make it happen. And I'm just thrilled to be here with you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for reminding us that hope is not only just possible, but necessary. Bill?
Akaya, man, so powerful. I've been getting texts all evening from people who are watching. One just came in from a real friend of Third Act, Sam Brown, who as a young man organized the biggest of the anti-war demonstrations in Washington, the Vietnam moratorium days. And he was talking a little bit about foreign policy and just saying, we do not want to elect Vladimir Putin's best friend to be president of the United States. No how, no way. And that's absolutely right. I also want to shout out to our friend Bette Midler, who's not feeling great, so not talking tonight, but she rounded up, I think, more viewers for this evening than anybody else. Her tweeting and social media was completely on point and enthusiastic as she has always been. So to the divine Miss M, many, many thanks. And now we're going to turn it over to actually another old jail buddy of mine, and one of my deepest friends in the environmental fight, my true brother, the person that I call on every occasion, happy or sad. And it's so nice to always be able to count on Reverend Lennox Yearwood, the head of the Hip Hop Caucus, and really in many ways the conscience of our big movements, and just the best. So Rev, over to you.
Thank you, Bill. I just want to say it's an honor to be here, honored to be on the board of Third Act, and so glad to see those who are donating. Keep giving. 15 years ago, I was blessed to be asked by then President Obama and EPA Administrator Alicia Jackson to put forth the first environmental justice campaign at the White House. I stood there literally on Barack Obama's birthday, which was August 4th yesterday, and was so proud to do that. Few years later, my dear friend Bill McKibben called me up and says that I need you to get arrested for fighting the Keystone XL pipeline at that same White House. And it was at that moment I had to make a decision. Do I stay on the inside or do I stay on the outside? And what's important is that when you have someone who at least understands climate, you can be in both places, inside and outside. So I joined Bill and Gus and our dear brother who's now passed, Julian Bond, and many, many others. And we got arrested in that moment. And I'll never forget Julian Bond being in a position where his arms were hurting, and me and Bill being on different sides trying to keep his arms up, because as we get older, those bones start to ache. And so I say this to you, that I've known Vice President and hopefully soon to be President Kamala Harris for a long time. She's a dear friend. And I will tell you this, we have no other choice in this moment. And we have to do all we can to push her across the line. What we have now is our moment. And as older people, we have to ensure that we're not done yet. So I just want to leave you with this message, that same White House where I got arrested outside for the Keystone XL pipeline we were fighting, later on, that same president at that time invited me back, President Obama, to be the White House champion of change on climate. All that's nice, but what's important is that we had somebody in the White House who could understand why we were outside getting arrested and why we were inside fighting for change. That's what we have to have with President Harris. And so I just let you know that if you are feeling tired and you're getting older, just know you're not done yet. We've gone through a lot. Civil rights, human rights, we're not done yet. Not done yet. Women's rights, we're not done yet. Queer rights, we're not done yet. Climate justice and fighting for a plan to move from fossil fuel to renewable energy, we're not done yet. Our bones may hurt. It may take us much longer to get out of bed, but we're not done yet. We may need milk during this Zoom call instead of another kind of beverage, but we are not done yet. We are needed right now. Let's keep fighting. Let's keep pushing. Thank you so much, and all power to the people.
Thank you, Reverend Yearwood. You know what? We are not done. And our work is not going to be done anytime soon. So thank you for the reminder. because so a lot of folks are tired. That's just real. And to remember, oh, I'm tired because so many of us have been working for so long for this moment. And not just this moment, but this is a particular moment in time. So let us take care of ourselves as we care for what's coming. I see that John's here. Shall we go to John?
Let's do it. Let's do
Okay.
it right now. John Kerry has played so many roles in this country. We were talking about Sam Brown and the first Vietnam moratorium a minute ago. John Kerry was the leader of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War when he returned from Vietnam as a young lieutenant. He went on to serve in Congress and in the Senate, to run for president, to serve as Secretary of State, perhaps most importantly to me, to be America's lead climate negotiator and diplomat. We wouldn't have the Paris Climate Accords in the way that we have them were it not in part for John Kerry. So what a pleasure to turn it over to someone with his depth of knowledge and experience just to talk for a minute about what this election and Kamala Harris mean. John, you're muted, so you got to unmute.
Unmute. I think I unmuted. Did I? Did I?
You're good. You're good, man.
There, I'm defying the odds of quite being an elder by demuting myself. Folks, well, first of all, I apologize to everybody for being late on the call, and I had difficulty getting the link. But look, I've been thinking about this a lot in the last few days, particularly because you hear these passing references in the news shows, even in the weather presentations on TV now, and sort of hear this quick throwaway of, oh, climate is changing, climate change, due to climate change. But the bottom line is that of all the security issues, and I've obviously been on from the Foreign Relations Committee to my opposition to the war to 28 years, I guess, on the Foreign Relations Committee, and then serving as Secretary of State. So I'm pretty familiar with security and security issues. And it confounds me a little bit that there is not enough focus on the reality of the climate security threat on a global basis. And we are seeing massive amount of damage being done. We lose 7 million people a year are dying because of the bad quality of air, which comes mostly from the burning of fossil fuel, which is unmitigated in most places. We have extraordinary damage being done to communities through these massive intensified storms, which are not a mystery. We don't have a rocket science need here to find somebody who's going to break out the new algorithm to tell us what's happening. What's happening is very simple. We burn fossil fuel without capturing the emissions, and we continue to do it at a growing rate. And that is what creates this blanket around the planet that doesn't release the heat. And so there's more and more moisture rising from the ocean because 90% of the heating of the planet goes into the ocean. And so this massive amount of moisture goes up into the atmosphere, travels around the planet, drops in these burst storms that we're seeing, these bombs, literally. And so we're finding we're living in a world where insurance companies are increasingly unwilling to insure, where readiness with respect to defense issues are in fact affected by floods, by intensive fires, by the lack of the ability of troops to even show up where they're supposed to be mustering, which is a problem I discovered when I was secretary and I went down to be briefed by the admiral in charge of the East Coast Navy. This is a reality for them. So, we have to draw. We have to be much more specific, much more intense, much clearer about what this choice is really all about, and why it is to our mutual benefit around the world, everybody, to every country, every person in the world benefits by transitioning faster to the new economy, the new energy economy, which we will absolutely get to. Make no mistake about it. We are inevitably moving in the direction of this transition. We're just not doing it at scale. We're not doing it big enough, fast enough. And we've got to pick up the pace enormously in order to do what? In order to avoid what the scientists have told us would be the worst consequences of the climate crisis if we don't get the targets of 2030 and then 2050, which we've all set. So really, this fight is about, the heart of what Donald Trump is all about, which is lying about everything. Lying about, the climate, lying about, run the list. I'm not going to go through the whole list now, but that serial lying is killing people already. And there will be tens of millions of refugees moving around the planet. And if anybody thinks the world was disrupted over these last 15 or 20 years by massive migration, wait until you see what happens when food cannot be produced in Africa or in South Asia or in other parts of the world, as water begins to become scarcer and harder to find. I mean, the downstream implications of what we're staring at could not be more real. And so we, all of us, have an obligation over these next months to make sure people understand this has to be a voting issue. And I'll just remind everybody, back in I know I think Jane is on this call and others who were part of that effort back in 1969, 68, 70. But the first thing I became involved in before I actually led the protests on the war was Earth Day. We organized the first Earth Day, and we brought 20 million people out of their homes around America to say, we don't want to live in a country where you can't see across one side of the city to the other, or breathing this incredible pollution, or living near a river like the Cuyahoga River that lights on fire. I mean, you can run a list here. And so we translated those 20 million people not into a one-day event, but into an ongoing political movement that actually made the climate back then, environment, a voting issue. And what happened was we targeted the 12 worst votes in the United States Congress. We labeled them appropriately the Dirty Dozen, and we defeated 7 of the 12 members of Congress. Immediately, the survivors, and believe me, I've seen this syndrome many times in Washington, there's nothing like seeing your colleagues lose to stiffen your spine. And people immediately went to work to respond to this call for action on the environment. And so we passed the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Management Act, the Endangered Species Act, and most importantly, we created something America didn't have, the Environment Protection Agency. The EPA came out of that movement. And so even Richard Nixon could see the politics of it, which were simple and straightforward. So that's what's at stake here. And we all have really got to get Kamala. I believe Kamala can win this race, but we've got to make this linkage between the economy and climate and security and the very obvious choices we have to get this done. Sorry to go on.
Thank you. That's right. I just want to make sure that everybody gets to speak. So thank you, John, and thank you for your amazing service to our country and the world over the years. I deeply appreciate that. I appreciate you, seriously.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for all of the efforts.
So next up is an amazing human who is one of the co-founders of Bioneers. She's been thinking about women's leadership for probably as long as all of us have been alive. She's an agitator, she's a dreamer, and she's also one of the kindest people I know. Nina Simons.
Oh, thank you, Akaya, and thank you, John, and thank you all for being here. This is the first
Oh,
time.
Nina,
Yes.
let me
Yes.
interrupt you real quick. I apologize.
Go ahead.
So obviously we're going to go over a little bit, and I just want to let folks know that we've got three more folks after Nina. So we're hoping that you'll stick with us. We'll probably end right around 6:15. So for those of us who are on the call, please do that. And let me turn it back to you, Nina. Sorry about the interruption.
That's okay. Thanks, Akaya. This is the first time in my adult life that I have had this level of wholehearted enthusiasm to jump in and support a candidate. I have to say, Kamala Harris is the most stunning combination of compassion and fierceness, of a willingness to stand strong and absolutely not be bullied. And she is coming to this election so well prepared. I mean, when I look at her background as a prosecutor, as an attorney general, as a senator, and as a vice president, you know, in all my work on leadership, one of the things I have come to understand is that leadership is a lifelong practice. And Kamala has had the benefit of amazing mentors throughout her life. And so I'm just super jazzed to support her, and to support her not only with donations and ongoing donations, but with my time and my talent and my energy. You know, I'm tired. I've been working at having a true multicultural, honest, and livable democracy for over 35 years. And I'm tuckered, but I'm not too tired to stretch for Kamala. You know, what's clear to me is that we and she need to help her win, not just by a skinny margin. She needs to win by a lot. And that's because, you know, the people that she will be defeating basically have no rules in a knife fight. And they have all kinds of plans that are devious and ways that they can hold on to power. But I'm really jazzed. And I believe that together, and if all of us on this call can make a commitment to not only financially supporting, but really supporting her as our next president for the sake of life on earth, for the sake of women, for the sake of the rivers and the pollinators, let's do this. So I hope you'll join me and stretch to give it our best. So here's to Kamala as our very next president. Thank you all.
Nina, thank you so much. You're always an inspiration to us. What a pleasure to hear from you. What a pleasure to hear from Secretary Kerry. And both of you reminding us that we need to stretch. Can you get that slide back up there again that shows us how we can give some money here? Because I hear that we are raising money at a clip that we couldn't even quite have imagined, and we want it to continue because money is a part of this. It's not the only part. It's super important that we have people power and sweat out there, but money is one of the things that helps make this happen. So give and give and give in somewhat the same way that our next speaker has given his whole life. Tim Wirth served in the LBJ and in the Nixon White Houses. He served in the Congress and the U.S. Senate. He served as and while he was in the Senate, by the way, he put together some of those hearings that helped us understand the climate crisis. He served as co-chair of the Clinton-Gore campaign. He served as head of the UN Foundation. He just keeps serving. Over to you, Tim Wirth.
Bill, thank you very much. Bill, I got to start this video. It says I can't start it. Is that coming in? We're getting it on now?
We can hear you anyway, so you keep talking. We'll work on the video, but you're coming through loud and clear. There you are.
Well, there we go. Well, thank you very much, Bill. And you're a great organizer as ever and a great model for all of us of keeping going. The nicest thing about the last 2 weeks is the fact that so many people had a great smile on their face. Now, what was that all about? That was all about their enthusiasm and their understanding that we were in for a real rodeo here. We're in for a really positive time. Reminded me of the 1961 and the Kennedy campaign, the excitement of that, and reminded me of Obama and Lincoln Park. And it was that same sense of a real possibility, building coalitions. We were going to put this together. There are a lot of coalitions that had dropped off and are now coming back again, and you can see that happening. Gus and John have both talked extensively about the climate crisis. We should remind ourselves how much can be done and will be done. With the things that can be done immediately and accelerated under Kamala, the methane capture is something that we must be doing at high speed. We got to go after these financial institutions that keep putting more fossil fuels, supporting more fossil fuels going up into the atmosphere. It's absolutely crazy. We got to understand the importance of endangered species. There are a few really high visibility items that must be done and can be done. And I'm absolutely convinced that Kamala will do that. She's surrounded by people who understand it, and she certainly understands the climate issue. Such a contrast from the red-haired, orange-haired guy who calls this a hoax. It's just a remarkable destruction. It's ignorance of the world class, destruction of the globe, destruction of next generations. How he can be getting away with this and not be challenged. I think part of our challenge is not only to be pressing how great Kamala is going to be, but also be going after him and what they're doing and how dastardly it is, how incredibly negative it is for the world, and we cannot let this happen. Final note that I would make, and I know the time is coming short, the election, our job is not going to be done just on election day. There's 60 days between election day and the certification process in January. And I know for sure that our opposition is deeply engaged in trying to screw up the certification process in such that they can make it not work, make it very difficult for us to maintain our democracy, make it very difficult for us to elect a president and to swear one in on the 20th of January. So we have to be very aware of the dangers surrounding the certification process. That's something that our organization, Keep Our Republic, is working on. Terribly, terribly important. We have to understand it's great what we're doing here, and we're contributing and do everything we can to help Bill and push this along. But also we have to remember the urgency of the 60 days between election day and the certification time in early January. Terribly important for the survival of our democracy. Thanks to everybody for doing this. Absolutely imperative, and on with this great generation. Away we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. You know, I've appreciated the fact that you've been looking out for our collective well-being in a global context for a long time. And, we haven't met, but I so appreciate what you've been doing for us. Thank you. Our next person is Catherine Grody, and she is an actor, she's a writer, she's a producer. And I love that she's been thinking about what it means to be an elder, which is different from what it means to be growing old or to be old. And Catherine, what as elders might we need to think about as in this upcoming time, and particularly as it pertains to Kamala?
Well, first of all, it's quite thrilling and intimidating to be with this extraordinary, diverse, interesting, quirky, brilliant activist crowd. I love Stanley Kunitz's poem. If you don't know it, please look it up. It's Live in the Layers. He's live in the layers, not in the litter. I am not yet done with my changes. I think he wrote that at 96. And I think every human being has the potential to evolve on a daily basis. And I have all these ridiculous notes here from the brilliant things everybody has said. I can't believe I'm an elder, and I'm thrilled to be an elder. My parents didn't get the chance to live to be elders. I have a grandbaby down the road that's 2.5, and another one being in the process of coming here right now. And I find how hopeless and despairing everybody was just 2 weeks ago, thinking of how we were going to frame this fight as not a positive one, but against the negative. And in 2 weeks, it totally changed. And all these forces coming together, it feels so good, as somebody said, to be hopeful. Rebecca said it, or to be hopeful, to fight for something. I think there are so many people who might not agree on every solution, but agree that hopefulness and making America laugh again and having humans that can have nuance and complexity and come together to find solutions while honoring all our differences makes a huge impression on our humanity. And I think, as Gus said, I'm terribly worried. I'm thrilled that he is working on the certification. I'm glad to hear that. But we have to have such an enormous victory that makes any question of that really moot. So I am thrilled to be with all of you in this. I would love to be in 3 dimensions. We will be on whatever front line, and certainly we will be to celebrate in January. And I will do everything I can. And I love the idea of older people and elders and younger people. And thank you for the word elder, because one of my small battles is to get rid of senior. Been there, done that. Not one of my best times. This elderhood and this action is a much more thrilling time. And I think the impossible is just a word. And we're going to see what is really possible. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, every extraordinary person that was on this. I'm so honored to be in this fight with you together forever. And you never stop fighting. You just keep growing and moving and going onward. So thank you. And let's do everything we can. Every phone call, every postcard, every Zoom, every webinar, every encouragement to each other, to people that know each other, to people that don't. We are all in this together. That's been on my front door since the astronauts set foot on the moon. We are all in this together, and I've never felt it, not in a long time, as passionately as I do now, that we can really actually work towards that. So thank you, and onward, everyone.
Catherine, thank you so much. You said it so well. And especially the part about we're going to write every postcard, make every phone call, knock every door. Look, there's a couple of things going on here tonight. The first is that we raised a hell of a lot more money than we thought was possible. When Akaya told me what her goal was, I laughed. And in fact, we've crushed it now and gone way past it. Better yet are the thousands of people signing up to do the work of democracy, because it is not a spectator sport. It is a participation sport. We sit back and watch the Olympics, but we get out and play in the game of democracy because it's the most serious game that we've got. We're almost to the end tonight. The last voice that you're going to hear before we come just to wrap things up, the last voice that we wanted you to hear belongs to one of my oldest and dearest friends and one of the greatest Americans that I know. And she's coming to us tonight from her home in Castle Valley, Utah, where they're in the middle of a heat wave. I think it's 100 degrees inside her home because I think that the air conditioner, the heat pump kicked out. But she is as stalwart as ever. A great organizer who has played an instrumental role in preserving big swaths of the most beautiful country in America, but also one of the finest writers at work in the English language today, the magnificent Terry Tempest Williams.
Thanks, Bill. And I just want to say, Isa wanted to say how much she loves Kamala Harris. And she doesn't agree with JD Vance. And so I'm really happy to introduce her to all of the elders here tonight. And she's been so patient, and I'm going to let her go. So, Bill, I love you. It's just been such a privilege to be part of this call. And thank you for all of us who are joining us and who have stayed with us. It's going to take that kind of stamina to get what we need to do done. I love Third Act. It's a revolution in gray. You've heard the wisdom. It's humbling, it's heartening, it's inspiring, and it feels right to be in conversation, to organize and support Kamala Harris.
I come to you from Castle Valley, Utah, lands traditionally inhabited by the Ute, Mountain Ute, and pre-Puebloan people. This summer, I can tell you we've had devastating flash floods. 2 in the last month. Night before last, there was a lightning strike and 2 fires ignited. Luckily, they were put out quickly. Like so many of us, climate collapse is not an abstraction, it is our daily weather report. On June 22nd, Brooke and I stood on the berm that has protected our house from these seasonal floods for more than 25 years. We watched it break. We watched the awe and velocity and force of Placer Creek rushing red water, uprooting elder junipers and flushing them down valley as the now raging river rushed past us, splitting in 2 channels like a band of wild horses spooked, racing down the west and east sides of our home. It was a terrible beauty, adding a punishing depth to my own definition of awe. It's here that you embrace the paradox that the forces responsible for this beautiful red rock country of buttes and mesas, stone arches, and spires in all its erosional power is the reason we wish to live here. And it may be the very reason we're forced to leave. These last 2 recorded floods dropped rain at an average of 6.5 inches in an hour, per hour, and extreme drought add to the equation with extreme heat. In a state like Utah, the realities of climate change are still being denied. When our state legislatures and our governor were confronted in 2023 about our shrinking terminal Great Salt Lake, bold, brave policies preparing for an uncertain future, a toxic future, a future where Salt Lake City might have to be evacuated. They were tabled in favor of prayer. Who can say Great Salt Lake didn't momentarily rise in those years of record-breaking snow because of the prayers statewide? But we need something more reliable than God. To quote my great-grandmother, the late Romney, faith without works is dead. 1 minute left. Believe the long-legged birds who are circling above us, desperately looking for water. Believe the forests that are burning, whose surviving trees will later stand as sentinels, charred witnesses to animal bodies reduced to ash. Believe in flash floods roaring through burnt canyons in the desert. Believe Great Salt Lake is retreating in plain sight as dust devils are whipping up clouds of cadmium and arsenic resting on the dry lake bed we are losing in the toxic world we have created. Before we can save this world we are losing, we must first learn to save what remains. This is more than an ecological or political crisis. It's a spiritual one. The earth will survive us. We are the ones being baptized by fire. May this fire fuel our collective resolve to keep the open space of democracy open. May this fire be ignited within our own hearts as we remember the human heart is the first home of democracy. This is not about us. It's about a future for those we love and our future descendants, our grandchildren, who deserve, alongside the descendants of all manner of creatures, the right to flourish as we have, long after our bodies are buried and sprinkled upon the earth. We are EITs, elders in training, as my friend Ted Strong, a true Yakima elder, informed me. We can speak up. We can act out of the urgency of our broken hearts. And we can raise money, give money again and again as we vote for climate-eyed leaders. Kamala Harris, our soon-to-be commander-in-chief among them, is one of those climate-eyed leaders. We are calling each other to action with the gifts that are ours. Our great task now is to listen and support our young people. And when asked, share with them the truths of our own experience and stand beside them as broken-hearted people who care. Let us put our love into action for Kamala Harris as president of what I pray is a more united States. Thank you, Bill. Thank you all.
Oh, let us please take a breath on that one. Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, so much and so beautiful.
And thank you, Kaya, for your leadership.
But I do have to appreciate you, girl, because I mean, I'm digging cat ladies these days, right? So the fact that you just brought your, I mean, I just want to name that, right?
She came, she heard what was being discussed.
Right, right. So thank you.
Friends, we come to the end of a powerful evening. And I know that I've got now the strength stored up because of those words it's like a battery. And it's enough power to keep me going for the next 90 days, which is what we need to do. This is a sprint. It's actually a good thing. Maybe America will learn not to have 3-year-long presidential elections anymore. Maybe we'll actually learn that we can do this in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
Do it because we get inspired. And I was inspired tonight. Akaya, I was inspired in no small part by the story with which you began tonight, the story of you as a girl integrating that school. And since we're talking tonight about being elders and about the course of history, I just want to go back there as we end and say, Kamala Harris is a Black woman married to a white man. When most of the people on this call were born, she would have been a criminal in half the states in this country. We have seen a lot of change, and we want to see a lot more change come. And we can make that happen. The next step in that chain, the next thing that we have to do is elect Kamala Harris on November 5th. So many thanks to all the people at Third Act who made this call happen tonight. So many thanks to the people who gave so freely. So many thanks to the people who are signing up for thirdact.org and for all that phone banking and postcarding and door knocking. So many thanks to all the people who have decided that they have this still in them to do. Akaya, over to you to close us out because you're the heart and soul of everything we do at Third Act.
I'm not sure that's true, but I also want to honor Kamala's mother, who is Indian. And so Kamala is also an Indian girl, woman now. And, her mama said to her, it's all about context. And it is. We are in a remarkable moment here. And we have the opportunity, as so many of the folks on this call reminded us, to be different here, to show up in a new way, to remember the possibilities, and most importantly is to be good ancestors. We won't be here. I imagine most of the people on this call, and certainly the people on the panel, will not be here in the next 50 years. So let us practice now and learn and teach each other how to be good elders and thereby good ancestors. Deep, deep honor. And on behalf of Third Act, I want to thank you for joining our talk. All the folks out there, all the folks in here, we couldn't do it without you. And thanks.
Thank you, everybody, and good night.